We make art here, so this art is meant to be enjoyed and consumed by people, but I think that wine, much like food, is a very intimate side of art. You literally take it into your body. This isn't just a painting that you hang on your wall. This isn't just something that you buy to look at or wear. This is something that you actually consume and experience.
Welcome to Growing Inspiration, the podcast that nurtures your passion for the arts and creativity. I'm your host, Shana McLean, and I'm thrilled to take you on this delightful journey through the vibrant world of arts and culture. In each episode, you can expect engaging interviews with a diverse range of artistic and creative individuals. We'll delve into what inspires them, explore their unique creative processes, and discover how their art enriches their lives. Together, we'll uncover the beauty of literature, the performing arts, the visual arts, food, wine, and spirits, and the inspiration gained through travel. Whether you're a connoisseur or just beginning your exploration, our conversations will inspire you to deepen your understanding and appreciation of the arts. So get ready to discover new perspectives, spark your creativity, and join a community of fellow art lovers. Welcome to the Growing Inspiration podcast. I'm your host, Shana McLean. In today's episode, I get to talk about one of my favorite things, wine. I live close to the Winery at Grange in Northern Virginia, and one of the things I have always appreciated about it is how different its offerings are compared to the majority of vineyards in this area. I knew I wanted to talk to the winemaker Seth Chambers and share with you his scientific and yet intuitive and creative approach to wine. Seth has been making wine in Virginia for the past 20 years. If you have ever doubted that wine is an art form, I think this episode will change your mind. Just as you learn the foundations of an instrument and then begin to experiment and push the boundaries, Seth is taking Virginia wine in new and exciting directions. Hi, Seth. Thank you for being with us today and for sharing with us about Grange and the winemaking program here.
Happy to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
So, as we get started, can you tell us just a little bit about your background and about Grange?
Sure. The background's a little intertwined. I was studying physics at Penn State. This is in about 2005. Working construction over the summers. Didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but then I started to uncover that if you have a physics degree, you're either going to teach or go into research. Neither really appealed to me. I wanted something a little different. I can remember the morning laying in bed in February. My dad had just moved down to Manassas, and I had the idea because I saw so many vineyard signs. I was like, working for a winery this summer might be fun. See what that's like. Sent out some emails, got a job at Pearman Cellars, actually, just a little bit south of here. The timing worked out that Chris, the owner, was actually opening Grange. So as I was coming into the wine industry, getting my first start, I was actually helping out turn this property from raw land to working winery. Stuff like laid the tile in the barrel room.
Wow.
Drywall. Like I was low on the totem pole, but I got to see raw land into working winery. I also got to work at Pearman Cellars and see the functioning of day-to-day basis, kind of how it goes. And fell in love, caught the wine bug, as they say. Changed my focus from physics to organic chemistry. Luckily didn't lose any credits, and then started working in Virginia right after I graduated, and luckily got the head winemaker position here in 2016. So
wow. And I think I read too that you went and got an enology degree as well.
Yes. So my bachelor's is in organic chemistry, and I have a minor in plant biology. That's very science fundamental oriented. I wanted something a little bit more applicable, geared towards enology. So I have a degree from Washington State, the enology program. So
great.
Got that in 2012.
And how do you take a degree like that then and apply it to winemaking? Like how did that set you up to be successful?
So because I had the science background, I felt that I was always geared towards understanding this industry. It's definitely an artistic industry, but there's a lot of science behind it. Everything that happens in the field, biological, with the photosynthesis of the collecting the sugars, you bring it in here, it's all microbial, them fermenting the sugars into alcohol. So with my science background, I felt that I was uniquely positioned to understand any topic that came along in this industry. But then the enology degree kind of focused everything else and said, okay, now we're going to do the science test that you do for wine. What does that result mean? How do you interpret this stuff? Decision making, how does it make your decision making better? To understand the left or the right turn at each juncture. Mm-hmm. So to me, it was a very good, fundamental, well-rounded education that set me loose in Virginia with the right amount of information and enthusiasm that I wanted. So,
would you say that that does set you apart from other winemakers in this region or in other parts of Virginia?
There's definitely winemakers with more formal education than me. There's definitely winemakers with much less. And I think that broad spectrum kind of allows everybody to find what they can do best. I definitely don't think there's many winemakers just like me, although there's many peers that I have that I resonate with. Look at, we share a lot of stories of what worked, what didn't. But no, I don't necessarily try to compare myself to everybody else. I'm kind of doing my own thing. I look at how everybody else is doing, so I know my own progress, but I try not to necessarily make direct comparisons. Am I better than them? Or are they better than me? It's not that kind of industry. So,
but I understand that you like to use a lot of different types of grapes, whether they're from Virginia or from other places. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So one of my criticisms for Virginia viticulture is we don't actually grow enough. If you don't grow your own grapes, Grange only grows about 5 acres, so we don't actually make enough grapes to cover our whole program. So we buy a lot of other Virginia grapes, and we also source from the West Coast. But on the open market for Virginia, you're looking at Cab Franc, some Cab Sauv, Chamberson, Viognier, Verdot, and Chardonnay, and that's about it. Some Merlot, but that's there's not that many grapes there to build a program. Yeah, you can make 5 or 6 really good wines, but at the end of the day, will 5 or 6 wines keep you afloat in a winery trying to appeal to everybody? So I wish Virginia had a little bit more variance in what they grew. And to satiate my need, I should say, we go to the West Coast. We go to Washington State, working with Zinfandel, Gewürztraminer, Riesling, Tempranillo, Grenache, Mourvedre, just to name a few. It really expands my palate, my working palate of more than what Virginia can grow. And it's definitely kind of interesting. Wines that I've never worked with, Sangiovese being a good example of this. We made one in 2023. Not a wine that I kind of focus on, not a wine that I focus on drinking, but our sales manager at the time really liked them. We had a meeting about it. Okay, let's try one here. It is one of my favorite wines from the 2023 vintage, is the Sangiovese, that I kind of went in blind of I have no idea what to expect, but I'll try my best and kind of go from there. So,
would you say what you're saying about the grapes that are grown here in Virginia, is that mostly because that's what people are comfortable with, or is there a climate reason for them not to grow them?
It is the sum total of both reasons that you just gave. Okay. And I say that because when you start a wine region, everybody starts with Chardonnay and Cab Sauv. Those are the 2 biggest names of wine grapes worldwide. That's what you start growing. Neither are suited here. So then you start going to, the big names of what else, because the way I look at it is you don't want to make a wine that's completely new, that nobody's ever heard of the grape and has a completely new flavor profile. Not because it's bad, but it'll be rejected on a global scale because it's different. Similar to the comparison of beef and venison. Venison's known as gamey, and beef is looked at as a higher quality meat, and that's not actually true. It's just our culture looks at beef as that. That's what's being served at the restaurants, and you get venison and, from hunters, that kind of thing. And it's the same way with wine. Just because it's new doesn't make it bad, but because people had to kind of grow what was acceptable here, we struggled with grapes that weren't good for Virginia's climate. That has led us to grapes that we are growing better here than anybody else can grow globally. I would say Petit Manseng and Petit Verdot are 2 great examples of that. But then there's also, so you have to spend money planting the grapes, $10,000 an acre at least, and then you wait 3 years until they're ready. Then you have to make those grapes, turn them into juice. That costs money. Then you have to turn it into wine. That takes time and money. So when you make a grape selection, you usually don't get to see the results of this labor, see the fruition 8-10 years later. So it's you have to, be forward thinking and not expect a quick return. So when you are a little bit more, you could take on the risk of planting something that's less known. You're not going to know if it worked for another 15 years. And by that time, you either planted more or you ripped it out, kind of deal. So it's a little bit of both. Of people have to understand that we need to find our own identity, but are people willing to take the risk, spend the money, and potentially lose a bunch of money through agriculture because you chose wrong? So that's kind of where we're at. But I do think that Virginia is emerging with some styles and grapes that we do better than other places. So I think sparkling wine is actually going to be a East Coast thing. It doesn't necessarily stop at Virginia state line. I think North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Maryland, they can do it if they do it right. I think Virginia is uniquely poised to start, how can I say this? competing in that market. So
we're going to get back to the Petit Manseng here in a second, but
please.
I want to pull that thread on the sparkling. What grape specifically would you use in the sparkling here in Virginia?
Great question. So what I think about sparkling in Virginia isn't necessarily what the world is focused on sparkling. Champagne made sparkling famous. That was actually a flawed wine region that couldn't make good still wine. So I believe the monk, he basically said, how can we take a flawed wine and make it palatable? He kept the CO2 in it, and thus sparkling was born. And when the world has known sparkling method champenois as a focus on the yeast and the tertiary flavors of aging and that kind of stuff, and you don't want a whole lot of fruit getting in that way. That's one of the reasons they focus on Chardonnay, because it's a very neutral grape. It's not like Sauvignon Blanc or Viognier. It doesn't have these big floral notes, fruit notes that come out at you. I think there is a hole in the industry for fruit-focused, not sweet, sparkling. Something that isn't necessarily just focused on the bread flavors, the yeast flavors, and the aging flavors, but it's a little bit more fruit-centric without adding sugar. So to answer your question, Chenin Blanc, Viognier, Petit Manseng, I think is a fantastic candidate for sparkling. I'm actually making one right now. A bunch of winemakers told me you can't put Petit Manseng in sparkling. And I understand their reasoning, but I disagree with it. And so I'm going to see what happens. Right now I have one. I started a little bit more conservatively. It's 40% Petit Manseng, 60% Chardonnay. We're going to see how this plays out. As I said, you make the decision and then years later you find out if it worked or not. So we're kind of coming up on that cusp. And if it works, I think, introducing Chenin Blanc, Viognier, Sauv Blanc in certain blends to make sparkling wine that's going to be more focused on the upfront fruit flavors of the grapes with the carbonation, and doesn't have to have, as I said, the sugar, and it isn't really focused on the yeast kind of flavors that champagne is known for.
That'd be really interesting. And when do you think you would have a bottle of that ready?
We're doing the final dosage and disgorging this summer, and then it's we want to bottle age it, so hopefully this fall, maybe next spring is kind of when that'll make its appearance. So
awesome. So we have here your Petit Manseng. Is this from this year? Or? This is
our 2021. I just grabbed the one that was cold in the fridge. Although we make it every year, it is grown on property. And I want to, in your questions, you had mentioned that you read that I brought Petit Manseng to Grange. That's kind of true and kind of not true. It was my favorite grape at the winery that I was at previously, and I couldn't get a hold of quality juice, so I didn't get to work with it. When I got the job here at LaGrange, they were growing it, but their winemaker always blended it away in small amounts into bigger lots. So I kind of changed that course and been doing a single varietal, single vineyard ever since. And excuse me, I misspoke. It's not quite a single vineyard. I am buying from other places to blend it in, but it is mostly ours. It's called our Catherine's Blend. And this is one of my favorite wines to make. And it's also, I don't want to jeopardize my luck with this, but it's also the easiest one I do, because I crush it, whole cluster press, settle it in a tank, put it in a barrel, and I don't touch it for about 3 months. I don't do anything special with this wine. It never requires extra attention during harvest, never has problems, and then usually we bottle it in the spring. I'm very pleased with the style it is. It's a dry Petit Manseng. A lot of winemakers say dry Petit Mansengs are unruly. I disagree. It has won a number of awards throughout the years, but our most recent one is our 2023 vintage, just took a gold in San Francisco Chronicle wine competition. So
that's awesome. Can you tell us what we're tasting here? This is a very
tasting notes or technical stuff. What would you?
Both, actually, because I'm not a sweet white fan, and this is really, really nice. The dry.
Yeah. So I'm kind of the same way. I tend to view sugar in wine as it's how you cover up faults. And if the wine has no faults, you can drink it dry and you can drink it warm, and that includes white wines. If you can have a sip of your wine that's been sitting there for 20 minutes in your glass and it's warm and it still doesn't taste bad, that's usually a good sign that the wine is quality. If you need it to be cold and you need it to be sweet, you're probably drinking something lower quality. So to put in context of why I try to make this, I really shoot for a dry version of this wine. I don't want the sugar kind of masking any flavors or getting in the way. And I kind of try to tame the acidity, because Petit Manseng is known for an unruly acidity. I don't use that word, but I'm quoting other winemakers. I think it's pronounced. I think it's definitely there, but unruly is a little bit far. But going by what they say, to tame that, to kind of bring that into shape, normal winemaking says when you have really high acidity, you add a little bit of sugar. That's one of the reason Rieslings sometimes have sugar to them, because that's another high acid grape. How do you balance acidity? You add a little bit of sugar. I add barrel. I add neutral French oak. So I do a barrel fermented version of this. And as I said, I fill it up, let it ferment. I like to stir it. Do a little bit of surly contact, meaning you let it ferment. It kind of clears up, and then you disturb the bottom and bring all the dead yeast back up into the wine. It's a way, in my opinion, to make sure the wine has everything it needs from the yeast before the yeast are kind of separated from it. I try to do that multiple times throughout the season, but sometimes work gets away from you. And as I said, I tend to this one very little, and it tends to be very consistent for me. It does exactly what I want every year. And being a dry Petit Manseng that we barrel age, I think it's a really unique version of this wine. I don't know too many wineries around here that actually barrel their Petit Manseng like this and keep it dry.
Right. I can taste the oak.
Mm-hmm. It's meant to be integrated, and really, if I can be so bold, I prefer it to where the oak ends, the acid begins, and that's kind of a blurred line, so you don't necessarily know, like, oh, that was an oak sensation or that was an acid sensation. It kind of has both. Acid starts first, oak finishes off, but that's what I'm looking for in this wine. So,
but it's not at all like a heavily oak Chardonnay or anything.
Yeah, no, it doesn't have that big buttery. It doesn't taste like chewing on a stick. It's well integrated. You get a lot of the baking notes, I think, from the barrel, and that works well with the pineapple and the fresh fruit that's also in the Petit Manseng.
Right. Yeah, that's lovely. And you mentioned the awards, and I think you mentioned the Petit Verdot also won the same year.
Yes, 2023. It was a fantastic vintage for Virginia. And as I said, that Sangiovese came out here. It was just a lucky vintage for me, I'll say, just because a lot of really good things came out that year. So Petit Verdot is a blending grape globally. It is a noble Bordeaux grape. They do grow it in Bordeaux, but they add it to blends to add a little bit of color or a little bit of tannins. And it's definitely a downplayed grape. Not a whole lot of people focus on it. Even in California, it's a blending grape. There's not too many Petit Verdot single varietals coming out. Here in Virginia, I think it is the best suited red grape for our climate. Loose clusters, thick skins, high acid. It just kind of stands up to our tough weather, and gives us a more consistent product yearly. Now, I do think Petit Verdot is not fantastic by itself. When you have 100% Petit Verdot in your glass, I think it becomes a little one-sided. It's a little bit more tannic, high acid, baked fruits. It doesn't have the soft, nimble athleticness of a more, a softer wine. I'll say that. I tend to hide Merlot in mine. That's actually where I get kind of the stage for the bulk of the PV. I think the Merlot kind of rounds it out and gives it a softer stage that makes it a lot more appealing in a lot of different aspects. Cab Sauv and Syrah, in my opinion, are the only two grapes that completely by themselves, they're the full package. I'm a musician at heart, so I tend to actually compare wine to music. We know the difference between rap, jazz, pop, and rock. But when we start talking about the difference of flavors, people kind of trip up and can't talk about it. So I bring stuff to music. A good red wine is going to be the symphony. It's going to have the deep, the bass, the high, the strings, the brass, and it all kind of works. It's all in harmony. If too many things are in discord, if one or two of the musicians are out of tune, you hear it and it ruins everything. That's a flawed wine. That's where the alcohol is too big. If a microbial, infection happened, little things make a big difference and they can ruin, something big. But when you have it all perfectly lined up and perfectly in tune, that's a really good wine, in my opinion. Cab Sauv and Syrah can kind of do that by themselves. All other grapes, particularly reds, I find blending to be the way to achieve that whole package theory, if that makes sense. So,
Right. That's interesting. Do you play an instrument?
Strings. I play a whole lot less than I want to, but started on guitar. It's been 30 years now, but that's taken me to mandolin, violin, piano. So any kind of string instrument is what I've gravitated towards.
Right. Interesting. Do you play with a group at all, or just on your own?
Not anymore. No. It's just kind of with my daughter, basically, mostly. So.
You mentioned when we were talking beforehand that you have recently started your own vineyard. You planted some vines out in Shenandoah, I think you said?
Yep.
What kind of led you to that and to that piece of property, and what have you planted? That's
a good question, and it kind of mirrors my philosophy of wine. When when the universe speaks, when opportunities present themselves, I kind of try to focus on them. And if I have something in mind, sometimes it brews for 2-3 years before it actually comes to fruition. So what led me to that? That was always the goal. Being a winemaker in Virginia, I'd always dreamed about having a farm, having a family, doing it myself, working for yourself, not for somebody else, that kind of thing. But owning land and wine specific is a very upfront capital heavy business. They say how you make a small fortune in the wine industry is you have to spend a large one and wait 10 years. So me being, working in the industry, not having access to that capital, it was one of the things that, eventually I'll get to there. Fast forward, got married and had my daughter Violet a number of years ago, and just the stars aligned where my dad and I had a dinner conversation. He was like, you've always wanted some land. I'd rather help you now with my retirement and kind of, watch you use it a little bit rather than waiting a few more years, until he's out of the picture. So he was like, let's start talking about buying some land. My wife went to a dinner not even 2 days later and said this in dinner passing, and the woman sitting next to her turned and said, I have 80 acres in Shenandoah. And it started a conversation there. I think I saw it 2 days later. My dad saw it a week later. We made an offer that it was under market, and, kind of didn't expect it to be taken, but it was, and kind of, everything aligned. And so we did that. That was 2021. Last spring, I planted 1,800 vines, 1,200 vines of Petit Manseng, 600 vines of Petit Verdot to get the vineyard started. But yeah, no, I mean, this has been a long time coming, and kind of we'll see what happens with it. So
that's awesome. Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
And so probably you said 10 years down the road is when...
I mean, these vines won't produce grapes until 2028. It takes at least a year to make, all that kind of stuff. So we're looking at 2030 as maybe we'll get some drinkable wine for sale off this property. So yeah, it'll be a number of years, but
yeah, but something to look forward to. Right?
Absolutely. And luckily, because of my contacts, I can actually, hopefully start producing wine possibly here. And as I said, I have that sparkling, being produced with a friend of mine. So there's already wine being made for that label, that idea, but we'll see kind of how it unfolds. I want to underline the idea that I really like working at Grange. I'm not planning on leaving anytime soon. I always joke that they'll have to fire me before I leave this job. And I am committed to that. So it's not that I would ever leave Grange and turn my focus to that, although that is my long-term plan. But I would always hope that I would still be a consultant here, executive winemaker, that kind of thing. It would still be my program.
Right. Now, as far as the program here at Grange, one of the things that you've talked about is the education and being able to bring a little bit more knowledge to the people that come and set it apart from just getting wine at Wegmans.
Absolutely.
So could you talk a little bit more about that and about the program you have here?
Sure. And I've said this plenty of times, as you said, we talked about it before, but you can get good wine at almost any place. Grocery stores, most 7-Elevens have pretty good wine. So how do you compete in a world with that where wine is your focus, and yet it's quality, but is it really that much better than the 7-Eleven stuff that is easier, cheaper, that kind of thing? So what I think Grange is doing, and where I've been pushing us to go, is to offer the education and the experience along with that bottle. Because there is always, and let me go on a quick side tangent. We make art here, so this art is meant to be enjoyed and consumed by people. But I think that wine, much like food, is a very intimate side of art. You literally take it into your body. This isn't just a painting that you hang on your wall. This isn't just something that you buy to look at or wear. This is something that you actually consume and experience. So with that being said, there's more to it than just what's in the bottle, what's under the cork. Who did you get it from? What questions did you ask? What kind of connection, what kind of community are you part of because of it? All of that matters to me. So what I think Grange is best suited to offer its consumers is an education and a full experience of, we're a winery that grows wine here. We work with West Coast grapes. So whether you have West Coast, flavors, you prefer West Coast flavors, or you want some Virginia stuff, we kind of offer both. We do many classes, dinners, and there's a lot of talking. It's not just, here's your wine, here's your food, go away. It's, this is why we did it. What do you think? If you've ever, I don't think you have, but if anybody has ever sat in with a class for me, I'm very conversational style. I don't want to sit and listen to myself talk for an hour. Although listen to this podcast, you might disagree, but conversation is going to help. It's going to help me explain what I'm trying to say to you better. It's going to demonstrate, comprehension going both ways. So that whole experience of being able to talk to the guy that did it, listening to his philosophy over what it's going to be, where it's going, what's coming next. That all matters. And that's kind of what LaGrange offers. That's what you won't get at Wegmans. You won't get at 7-Eleven. And not to disparage, other wineries, I don't think you get it at about 50 to 60% of the wineries around here either. It is very much just, here's your wine, go away kind of deal. And that's not what I want to offer here at LaGrange. So.
Right. No, and that's I love what you said there about the art being something that you take into yourself and it becomes part of you in that way. And that's a really interesting way to look at it.
It's important. And that's, I take my job very seriously. What's on the label matters. So there's a lot of conjecture about using West Coast grapes here in Virginia. Do people blend? Do you make the Virginia wines better by blending into it? Something that I'm committed along that thought is, if the bottle says American on it, it's West Coast, doesn't have Virginia grapes in it. If the bottle says Virginia, I don't blend any American grapes into it, even though legally I could, and I know wineries around here that are doing that. I want them to stand on their own merits, and I'm not trying to hide, I'll say, higher quality grapes in some Virginia wines to make them look better. So ethically, morally, that is important to me, that I take that job seriously, that you are consuming this art. This is a very intimate connection between me, you, the land, and your experience with it, whether it's you're having it with your family, with dinner, or, you by yourself in a book. It's an experience-based thing. So
as far as that goes, and we talked a little bit about, the chemistry and the science that you've brought into it, and then now you've kind of mentioned the art. Like, what inspires you when you're making wine? Is there someone you've worked with, or just things around, or what kind of makes you choose how to blend a particular wine in a particular year?
I try to draw inspiration every day, and whether it's from my daughter, which is a big source of it, to a very benign conversation I'm having with a consumer up front. So it's not always just one thing that's driving me. I'm constantly on the lookout for how can we make what we do here better, more honest, and because it's a business, cheaper. That's always a part to it. But what works better, I think, is really the idea. So my inspiration comes from everywhere, whether it's the weather and it's a harder year for growing grapes, whether it's the stuff that came from West Coast, higher quality, lower quality. I'm always looking to do the best I can with what I've got. And it's an ever-changing world, so that's never... When I stop trying to learn about what's going on and stop learning and think I know it all, that's when I'm going to stop growing as a person, growing as a winemaker. So to me, I don't know, inspiration comes from everywhere. It's something that I try to incorporate every day into my life of how can I do this better, look critically at what I'm doing. And then, it matters to me how the customers are. So feedback from them matters a whole lot, whether it's a wine dinner, whether it's just a tasting, that kind of stuff. I'm always looking for honest feedback. So.
Is there anything else that you would like to talk about in this part of the conversation before we maybe move into the winemaking room?
To expound on the last question you asked about kind of what inspires me, and you had asked a minute ago about creativity. So being a string player, I actually think that music, and specifically string instruments, are some of the most emotional kind of sounds that we can make. Obviously, having a voice... but not everybody can sing very well. But with a string, I feel like when you can, hold down a string instrument, even a piano key, there's a lot that is conveyed with that. It's just as important what's in the spaces too. So the space between the notes matters as much as the notes. And to specifically talk about string players, something you don't get on piano as much, but on a violin or a guitar, pulling the string matters, and it can change little things, but it really it affects as I say, the emotion of what's going on. So I find some of the most rampant creativity that I identify with to be guitarists and violinists, that kind of thing, just because what they can do. Violins have 4 strings, and the amount of joy, sadness, anger that they can kind of convey, I find just to be baffling. And so what I find to be talented is things that can't be reproduced by everyday people. So that's really what I look for in are you talented? Are you a talented guitarist, violinist? Are you doing stuff that everybody can do, or do you kind of have your own style that people try and emulate? And I apply that to wine too. So I think the best winemakers are the ones doing consistency. And that's one of the reasons I like talking about what I do. I think if you can come in here and know what I do and do it better than me, you deserve my job. So like, I will tell you exactly how I did it, where I sourced the grapes, what I thought about, what yeast I used, the barrel I used, all of my techniques. Because at the end of the day, I think all of that data, it won't help someone trying to emulate me. They got to find out what they do better. This is what I'm doing, and good luck trying to do it better than me. And that's not conceited, but just what I'm doing, I find a lot of confidence in it. So
yeah, definitely. And I always ask people, who inspires you the most, or who do you think is the most creative person? I want to mix that up just a little bit.
Okay, sure.
You mentioned string players and guitar players. Like, who would you say, like, either a person or a piece that inspires you the most in one of those instruments?
A guitarist named Jake Sinninger, actually. He's from Humphreys McGee. He does things on the guitar that it makes me never want to pick it up again. Like, it's like, I'll never be that good. But I've heard him talk about players that he's looked at that and felt that way. So it's just this, everybody's climbing that mountain to, make themselves confident enough to whatever they're doing. He's a person that I really look up to on his proficiency on technical stuff too. It's not, he's in a rock band, but he's actually a heavy metal guitarist. So it's like, he's not even playing what he wants to play half the time. But he's doing it because that's his job, and that's kind of what their following is. And I kind of appreciate that too. I don't enjoy every style of wine that I make here, although I'm going to be proud of every wine that I make. I'm not making it for me. I'm making it for my, consumers and customers and guests and my friends. So.
Right. Now, if you had to drink one grape for the rest of your life, would it be Petit Manseng, or what would you choose?
Probably. Yeah. And the only reason I'd pick Petit Manseng over Petit Verdot. Petit Verdot is a really good red, and I love my reds. But I like variety, and Petit Manseng can be a dry white. I've had it as a stainless steel with a little bit of sugar as a good iteration of it. It can be done in sparkling, which I'm dead set on proving it can be. So there's more you can do with that. With a Petit Verdot, it's like, I don't want to say it's a one-hit thing, but it makes a really good red. I haven't seen too many rosés with it, and using it in sparkling would probably be a little disjointed. I would just think off the top of my head. So yeah, just because there's more to do with a Petit Manseng, that's the grape that I would choose.
Awesome.
And it's why I planted more of that than anything else starting at my own vineyard. So
you were just telling me about your vineyard out in Shenandoah.
Yep.
Can you tell me a little bit more about why that is so special to you?
Sure. So my time in Virginia, I've learned that I believe the Shenandoah Valley is the best place to grow grapes in the state, basically, for a lot of reasons, but it's mostly the how the land meets the weather patterns and all that kind of stuff. The Shenandoah gets less rainfall, which is good for Virginia. We want less rainfall in regards to viticulture. And also the word terroir, it means the personality of the site. What is that? What does that the soil mean? What is all of the microbes to the bugs to the wind patterns? How does that all kind of compute, and what does it mean for the land? I'm really excited because I think it's one of the best stories to tell. The Appalachian Mountains is the oldest mountain range in the world. As I digging posts and holes for my vines, I was unearthing 200 million year old fossils that were sea creatures at the top of this mountain at 1,400 feet elevation. These soils haven't been overturned in that long. If wine benefits from an interesting story in the soil, I'm really looking forward to uncovering that in the Shenandoah Valley. So the terroir of the oldest mountain range in the world.
That's amazing. And one of the other things I wanted to ask you about, we kind of talked about climate and about what Virginia can do versus the West Coast. Have you noticed, since you started in this business, has there been a change in what you can grow here? Like as far as the climate changing over time, or has it been too short of a period?
Too short of a period for my career. Been here about 20 years, and I remember drought seasons, and I remember 2011 and 2018 we had derechoes and 30 days worth of rain. So we've had rainy summers, and we've had really dry summers. The summer of 2024 being one of the worst. But in context of what does that mean in the last century, I can't really tell you that it's changing. So we'll see. It is farming, and you're always kind of be subject to the weather. So it is. We're gonna, if it changes, we got to change with it. So
right, great. Well, maybe show us the tank room.
Sure, absolutely. So this is the tank room next to the barrel room. All of the winemaking stuff happens in these two rooms. If you can see the ice on the tank right now, I'm going through a process called cold stabilization for the whites. I'm pulling out excess tartaric acid. If you've ever seen, they call them wine diamonds or wine crystals at the bottom of your white wine or at the cork. It's a natural product. It doesn't change the flavor of the wine, but Americans like their wines to be crystal clear. It's not done in Europe as much, so you find more the tartrates in European wines. But Americans like their wines clear, as I said, so we do it here and make that happen in tank. Getting ready for bottling. These wines will be bottled in about a month. So that's what's happening in here at the moment.
Great. And so of these, do you kind of interchangeably use them, or are some like you only ever put only tanked wines versus ones that have been in oak in the past? Or
that's a really good question. All these tanks are different sizes. Some are big and fat, some are shorter. So every wine that I have goes through stainless steel storage at some point, whether it's just for filtering or the day before bottling, that kind of stuff. Only certain wines go to barrel. But the difference is that for stainless steel, you don't want ullage, is what the French call it. It's the head space of a tank. And that's why if I have a little bit of wine, I want it in a smaller tank. If I have more wine, I want it in a bigger tank. You basically want to match the size of the tank to how much volume you have. But yeah, all of my wines will spend time in stainless steel. I look at the difference of stainless steel and oak as kind of the difference of a grill and an oven. It's not that one is different. It's just if you're making a lasagna or a burger, you're going to choose one or the other. You're not really going to make a lasagna on the grill or, burgers in the oven, although it can be done. They're just different. So reds and wines that you want to age longer and have micro-oxidation, you'll put into oak. Wines that are fresher, you want to keep them away from oxygen. They're usually younger. That's better suited for stainless steel for their entire life. But it does kind of go back and forth.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is I love ruby ports, and your snort is one of my absolute favorites. And so I think I remember seeing in some of the previous literature that you tend to kind of continually feed that, almost like sourdough.
Yes.
So why does that make a difference?
So yes, that's a great question. So ruby ports are going to be 5 years and no oak, I believe. And 20 ports are going to be aged longer with oak. Ours is called a Solara style. And Solara is normally done for whiskeys and sherries, that kind of thing. And basically, if you can picture a pyramid of barrels, new wine goes into the top one, and then the top one fills the next layer fills the next layer, and then we bottle from the bottom. But the key is you never empty the barrels completely. I only take about 70%, 60% out of the bottom barrels and then have it cascade down, refill at the top, and go from there. So what you get after 10 years, or this one has been made since about 2005-06, so we're almost looking at a 20-year report. There are 20-year-old wines in that blend, as well as 2-year-old wines, and every step in between. So you get this entire cascade of everything that an old wine brings to the table, and then you still get the youthful kind of jubilance of a young wine and what that gives. So it's a very complex wine. It's a way to age beverages a lot longer and add a lot of complexity. As I said, for whiskeys and sherries, they do that as well. But the Solara port is a fun wine to make because of that. So,
well, thank you so much for being with us today, and we'll highlight all of the links and so forth in the show notes afterward.
Sounds
good. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Cheers, definitely. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Growing Inspiration. I hope you found today's conversation as inspiring as I did. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to subscribe and share it with your friends. To dive deeper into the world of arts and creativity, visit my website at gardenofmydelights.com for exclusive content and resources, including show notes. Don't forget to subscribe to my newsletter for the latest updates and insights. You can also connect with me on Instagram for more inspiration at Garden of My Delights. Until next time, keep nurturing your creativity and looking for beauty and wisdom all around you.